Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy Bringling. Today we have a very special day. We are going to talk about my favorite subject, lean. We at Bringle team, along with Solworks, Poonam Foundation, and Women Lines, would like to welcome all the participants who are there with us in this Zoom call and are also watching us live at our YouTube channel, Bringle Talks. Just a quick recap as what were the pearls of wisdom from our yesterday's speaker on process innovation. We had a very interesting week start yesterday, which Smita gave a wonderful story and the highlight that we should understand what we are doing before we take any innovation and changes in the organization. She brought up beautifully the people focus while driving the process excellence. Dr. Hari have got international, national, and local scenarios and brought up various businesses, right from education industry to e-commerce to even a normal IT industry. Before we can take, and he spoke about how we can back up to gear up for the post-COVID scenario and give ample opportunities in the various industries. In coming times, we are going to get more jobs because of the right processes. In fact, post-COVID scenario, India is going to get more and more manufacturing sector being developed, and there are a lot of services and job requirements will be coming up. And that's a very positive news from him, which he has explained and very beautifully explained. Anil Patel, who was joining us from UK, he very categorically explained about the processes, how it can be even used in a technology world. He being a solution architect, how we can do by doing the best by designing the right business processes as per the customer demands, and it has to be on an ongoing perspective. Dr. Rakesh Gupta says product and process innovation goes hand in hand. He says India is going to be the market with our quality at Chinese price. And that's a very interesting point which he has brought up. Ram Mohan has a wonderful view in the process innovation, which is out of the box. He cited few examples of how we can generate multiple revenue channels that can be different than the services. He talked about innovation, vision, good ideas, and culture, how it can go hand in hand. He also advised to create a complete ecosystem around it with a lot of processes and right structure being in place. Now, today's topic of cross-border 21 days business sustainability challenge is going to be lean modeling and waste elimination. And before I request Charu to introduce the speakers for today, I would like to request all the businesses, startups, entrepreneurs to please upload their pitch decks at www.bringleacademy.com/course/business sustainability with their pitch decks so that we can select your startup for the live pitching week starting 27th of April in front of our cross-border investors. Thank you so much. And thanks, Charu. With this, kindly please introduce the speaker.
Thank you so much, Asha. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to whole global community there. Myself, Charu Mehrotra, founder of online magazine womenlives.com, which is listed in top 40 women's online magazine to follow in 2020. It's such a pleasure to welcome speakers in the panel. The topic for today is lean modeling and waste elimination. We have John S. Hamillion from Singapore. He is innovation and transformation leader. John S. Hamillion is a change catalyst with over 20 years of experience at General Motors, Dell, and his own business, specializing in innovation, change and transformation, digital age management, strategy, organizational development, and lean agile design thinking. With assignments based in USA, China, Korea, India, and Singapore, he has held 2 Asia Pacific director positions. Holding an MBA, John coaches and trains organizations on how to innovate and transform, and is a lecturer at various institutions. He's also a published writer on management and an active speaker at global conferences. Welcome, John, to the show. Then we have Kuldeep Chawla from India. He's an educator, business excellence consultant, mentor, and advisor. With 30 plus years of a professional experience in IT, BPM, and manufacturing organizations, experienced in designing, implementation, and adoption of various process transformation initiatives across various domains and business entities of varied size and scale. He has experience with customers in US, Europe, in banking, retirement, in insurance, manufacturing verticals. Welcome, Kuldeep, to the show. I hand over to Aisha to take it further.
Thank you so much, Charu, for the introduction. John, I would like to understand from you first in terms of what is lean and how it kinds of differentiate from Six Sigma processes.
Thanks for the question. How much time do we have for that one?
John, you have enough time.
Joking.
You have enough time. Don't worry. So we can.
Yeah, that's a. I guess the short answer. We could talk for a long time on the difference between Lean and Six Sigma, but we can say that Lean places a heavy focus on customer value. So while we do talk about waste elimination, we always want to do the waste elimination only in the context of increasing or at least maintaining customer value. And that's a step that often gets skipped because we want to cut the waste so rapidly, and we jump into starting to cut this, cut that. And sometimes we miss that first step is who's the customer, what do they value, and what problem are we trying to solve for the customer? And then we would use Lean, all kinds of Lean techniques, which range from strategy techniques, Hoshin Connery, to process improvement techniques, to even daily management. So Lean is probably the only thing out there, and Six Sigma is an awesome application as well. But Lean is probably the only thing out there that's a full management system, everything from strategy to designing processes, to managing day-to-day, to people development, to even leadership behavior. So if you do, kind of really deeply embrace Lean, it's a great part of a successful business journey, I think.
Okay. I think that's a very interesting thing, and the way we have seen is because we have Lean topic as of today, and tomorrow we are talking on Six Sigma. So the way what we have understood in the organizations is that Lean basically attacks the waste, and Six Sigma attacks the variation. Now, John, I think I am also trying to understand that is there any specific case study which you can share it from the services sector, which could be more interesting from the Lean deployment perspective or a Lean transformation? I mean, specifically in the services domain.
Yeah, in general, that's a great question. Yeah. One of the great, just as far as books go that have a lot of examples, the original Toyota Way is still one of the best books out there, but it was a little bit focused on manufacturing. So Jeff Liker pretty recently refreshed the Toyota Way, plus he also made it for service companies. So it's called the Toyota Way to Service Excellence. And the whole book is all service oriented. So it's really awesome. And then the other part, a little bit more specific, I'm part of the Lean Global Network. So every year we have an annual meeting. And last year was in Brazil, which was some great service IT companies using Lean, Agile. One in Brazil, it's a small app software company called CINT. They're using Lean, Agile, design thinking seamlessly in applications we're now starting to call Lean Digital. So how do you apply lean thinking in the digital virtual space? And another area to share is the year before that, we got a chance to see there's a book that you can get now. It's a small book. It's called The Lean Bakery, and it is all about lean F&B. So that's a great services area that I want to explore more here in Singapore because we're so F&B oriented. And this cafe slash bakery, about 100 stores in Barcelona, applied lean thinking to their whole, not only the operation, but their support departments, the whole company, with a lot of success. And then we also stayed also in Spain, but in the Canary Islands, there's a lean hotel, if you can believe it, where everyone at every level on a daily basis is working on Kaizen. We even got a chance to see these chefs. The chefs were actually working on their cooking process. You go to the bar and the bartenders are working on how they can improve their processes. You go to the housekeeping and the housekeepers are working on 5S, workplace organization, standard work to improve their work. And at the higher levels, they're working on more bigger innovation type things. And of course, insurance. Also in Brazil, we saw a finance company and an insurance company, all using lean thinking end to end, up and down their whole organization. Again, with great results. So for services, for example, me that I grew up in manufacturing, but I left General Motors quite a number of years ago. Last assignment was in India, actually. And all I do now is services, very, very little manufacturing for us, for me. And that's true of a lot of the lean community now.
Okay. So that's really wonderful, John. And I think the way you are explaining about applications of lean in IT, the digital world, the applications of that in the F&B sector. And I have seen a lot of applications now, I think, in the travel sector as well. Like a lot of airlines have cut down their cost and try to make it more leaner. And even not only from the operations perspective, but also there from the pricing standpoint in terms of their cost cutting, what is required, what is not required, and so that they can bring in more profitability. So I think it from that perspective, it directly impacts the profitability of the organizations, bring a better value to the customer, and ultimately it kinds of brings more focus that what customer is looking towards as a value, and you keep only those things what is being perceived as value or what customer is ready to pay for. Otherwise, everything else is a non-valuated activity.
Exactly.
Right. So, John, I'll come back to you. I think before that, Kuldeep, I have one question for you. What are the typical type of waste which are available in lean methodology, and how it can be utilized in various segments? I mean, be it manufacturing and I mean, because it cut across sectors. So how would it be impactful on those different type of waste, and what are the usage of it? Or how, what are the applications of it? If you can just throw some light on that.
Yeah, sure. Like typically the methodology prescribes or suggests that there are 7 types of wastes. And the simplest way to remember that is Steamboat. That is T for transportation, I for inventory, M for motion, uh, W for waiting, O for over processing, overproduction, and finally the defects.
So, I
And
mean, I have a, so there was a different, sorry to cut you short. So there was a different thing which has come up recently. It's called downtime.
yes,
So downtime is the another one and easy to remember that you are reducing the downtime of anything, and that's how it becomes easier.
and of late there have been talks about adding one more, and I
Okay,
strongly believe that that is also an important waste, which is the waste of talent in
absolutely.
because many a times people are not utilizing their assets, predominantly the human resources, which is the talent, to their full potential and capacity. Mainly the potential part, because what even I have seen in various things is people at middle management and senior management levels spend almost 30 to 40% of their time on administrative tasks, which can be easily is not adding any value, either reviewing a report or signing off a voucher, which they are not adding any value, so on and so forth. Which actually can be looked at in terms of, is that activity really required? So waste is something, broadly, when we look at any process in the value chain, right from the input, which in a manufacturing organization could be a raw material, or in a service organization could be an information, and how that input moves through the various stages of processing till it reaches to the customer, which in form of a product or service which he or she is expecting. And today's customer being wanting many things. He wants flexibility. He is impatient. He wants everything at a click of a button. He is expecting, earlier quality was something which was considered as a novelty, but today it is given that I need to have good quality product. So another acronym like on time, in full, error free, OTIFEF. The customer expects on time, as what he is expecting. In full means if I am expecting the deliverables in a particular stock or a particular quantity, and absolutely error free. And that is not only restricting to the product but also to the service which comes in later. Like for example, if we go to a restaurant, the product is the food which we are having, but if the bill is incorrect, or the at the end of the food when he brings the bill, and if that is incorrect, then it is a defect. It's not valid, though I have received the quantity in full and on time. So it is being looked at in the very holistic manner in terms of, and wastes are like there everywhere. The irony is when organizations are focusing on improvements, like to just give you an analogy, when we look at an entire processing time or an entire end-to-end time, let's say that the entire time is say 10 minutes, of which the actual time which is required by the user or by the machine is 4 minutes, um, wherein the 60% is going on various other tasks. uh, when people are focusing on improvements or productive improvements, they are looking at how do we cut this 4 minutes to 2 minutes, and they are not focusing on the 6 minutes which are actually going waste. Or of those 6 minutes, maybe there are 4 minutes which are actually going waste. Like the initial question which you had for John in terms of the lean and the Six Sigma, that's the way I look at it. That lean focuses on end-to-end value chain, and Six Sigma is focusing on how do I control variation in the process, which is being there. So every step, like when we talk about over processing in IT, we typically see that there's a study, in fact, that close to only about 20 to 22% of the features or the functionalities of any systems are used by the users, which is a classic example of over processing. Rest features and functionalities are not used at all, but they have been produced and customer is asked to pay for it, and it requires more time to produce those functionalities as well. And out of those which are used, most of them are again defects which go into maintenance. So that's a different story in terms of how IT works. But yes, there are these kinds of wastes which are there. Whenever we go to a supermarket, the time which we spend on in the queue to get our bills out or to get our checks out is again a waste of time, because we are wasting time waiting over there, and not actually doing what we want. So there are various applications wherein we can look at how to eliminate or reduce these wastes.
Okay. Uh, Kuldeep, I have one specific question from the small and medium businesses
Mhm.
to you. See, large corporates have got resources.
Right.
They can deploy a lot of methodologies. I mean, they have dedicated teams on quality and process excellence with lean and Six Sigma experts. But when it comes to small and medium businesses, and I'm talking about those organizations which are probably 20, 25 set of people, or maybe even more, but they don't understand the value of lean today. For them, everything is going to take some time. There's already leaner. I mean, even if the organization is 100 plus employees, they feel that they are leaner. What do you recommend to them in terms of lean deployment, and why they should be deploy lean at a very early stage of the organization?
Well, it lean is actually a habit, I would say, a habit of continuous improvement or a culture of continuous improvement. Let's put it as a culture of continuous improvement. And any culture to develop requires a series of habits to be developed. And one of the critical habit is to question, is the customer going to pay me for this activity? By every employee in the organization. So there are so many activities which we do in the organization as a part of processes, as a part of steps, as a part of transactions, as a part of activities, so on and so forth. Am I adding any value in this particular step, and is the customer willing to pay me for this activity or this action or this extra thing which I am doing, so on and so forth. If the answer is yes, then naturally I am doing a value add activity. If the answer is no, then there could be two parts to it. One is this required because there is a statutory or a regulatory requirement and I am forced to do it? And if it is a statutory requirement, I have no choice, but I have to do it. The If it is not in the first two buckets, then naturally it's a non-value add activity which I should not be doing. So at the beginning of any process or any task or any activity, if every employee in the organization, how small or big the organization is, if that habit or that culture is built in to question that, is this a value add or a non-value add, or the third category is a business value add, which is the statutory and the regulatory part of it.
Right.
uh, that culture can be developed irrespective of size. And well, though expertise and methodology is required, but there are simple tools which any and every organization can adopt and implement without actually engaging a consultant or an expert from the outside as well. The, the 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 success is in terms of how is this culture getting built up. If we have the typical culture like what we have in India, you mentioned in the beginning that Chinese price and of good quality. Well, for that we'll have to develop the culture of quality in this country. We have a chalta hai attitude or a culture in the country.
Right.
Now, this chalta hai is not focusing on quality. The moment we have a quality culture in the country, definitely we will be more competitive than any other country because we have the right talent and the right availability as well. So, size, irrespective of the size, it's more about the habits what we build in our employees, which will set the culture in the organization. So, in fact, the larger organization face challenges because they treat it as a project, they treat it as an initiative, and their focus is that how many lean projects have I executed, which is detrimental to continuous improvement. Lean talks about continuous improvement, daily, day in, day out, like what John was mentioning earlier, in terms of the chefs looking at what changes they can make and improve, the bartender looking at what he can do at his workplace. So it's a culture which is being built. Whereas in the large organizations, they focus on how many projects I have executed and what is the savings I have developed. So it's actually the other way around. It's reasonably simpler and easier to adopt because it's easier to build that culture in the small sized organization.
Absolutely. I think you have brought up a very important point here, which is culture. I think quality is all about setting up the right culture. And when I've been working with organizations, and even while developing, my own startups, and now Bringle, the only thing which we kind of figure out, or we try to ensure, is that how deep is my quality DNA, how strong is my quality DNA, and this DNA has to be in each individual. Everybody has to look it from the quality perspective. Yes, quantity does matter, but there is a quality aspect which is much more essential when we talk about any delivery onto that, because customer ultimately is paying for the quality. Now, you may change, you may have a different pricing available, and accordingly set up the pricing. You cannot say that I have decided this low pricing because of the customer, but I can give you only this. So if you are deciding to a right quality, decide that quality, set up the right pricing, and that has to be deep within the all levels of your organizations, be it the last leg of the person. In fact, we work with some of the educational institutions today, and we try to kind of tell them that why are you trying to do deploy. They have quality circles within their institute. Now some institutes have started setting up that, but they're struggling always with improving their UGC scorings, or the HR ministry, or the ministry scorings which they are supposed to do. And the main aspect is there is about the lean deployment and quality culture bringing in. And they're badly struggling. I mean, their teachers quality, their students the facilities, the infrastructure quality, all is actually, we are talking about the culture part of it. Now if you do not bring that culture or understanding of a lean methodology or a quality perspective till the bottom level of the person, even to the level of a peon, the person would never understand, the organization will never be able to grow. Because even if one person does not contribute or creates an opposite effect, or does not support the activity, the entire organization will come down. So it's all about how strong your quality DNA is. Are you able to transform your quality perspective, or I would say transform the people's mindset into a quality mindset? And once that happens, that DNA is built, any organization, be it small, big, and large, it will definitely grow to a very, very efficient level. And in fact, as you rightly said, when you are small, it is much easier to deploy, rather than when you grow large. Like large organizations, they struggle today to actually bring that culture down to the to the bottommost employee, to an analyst, or maybe a fresher who is joining the organization. And till that time, that level, because when they interact with the customer, they have to understand the value of the quality. They have to understand the value what needs to be delivered to the customer. And if that is taken care of, it takes large time. It takes really, really a humongous time to reach down to that level. So if your organization, when it is small, we can build it up right from there. It becomes pretty easier to manage when they grow large.
Absolutely.
Uh, with this, Bala, if you're there, I would want your perspective on this, especially from the large organizations you have worked in India, and you know, and how it is so important to build up the quality DNA within the organizations.
Am I audible?
Yeah, Bala, I've just
Yeah,
unmuted you.
yeah. So basically, to supplement what John and Kuldeep said, um, both Six Sigma and Lean are improvement methodologies. Uh, as both of them said, and you also reiterated that Lean is a culture of workflow simplification and then smoothening the workflow. Six Sigma is more of a intervention where you need to get the improvement very objectively measured. So both have their own merits and their own places. Coming specifically to your topic, it's very relevant because as I know, our organization, I was working for Wipro at the time. This was about 14, 15 years ago when we thought about a methodology to improve the software processes. And at the time, we had a fair experience of Six Sigma. We had reached some level of maturity in that. And then we were looking for a newer methodology. So in fact, some of our senior executives went around the world. They looked at EFQM. They looked at Malcolm Baldrige, methodology. And incidentally, they visited Toyota in Japan and then came across the TPS also, Toyota Production System. So the executives were impressed by the applicability of TPS in a larger organization, because this was around 2004, 2005. The company was already, more than 45,000 people. So if you have to introduce a new methodology, it cannot be something like a Six Sigma where you have to teach statistics and things like that to people. So it has to be a kind of a culture, and then not very objective, a little bit of subjectivity is involved, but then it has to smoothen the workflow and thereby achieve the improvement. So we picked up the TPS and tried to apply it in the software development. Probably we were the first to do it. We took up each of the lean tenants, whether it is a SMED or any of the lean tenant, and then try to apply to the software development. What we learned in the subsequent 2 years, around 2004 to 2006, is that not all tenets of lean are amenable for adoption in, say, in the software development or in the IT sector. So what we decided is that there are certain things like value stream mapping, or continuous improvement, or Kaizen, or even things like SMAD, single minute exchange of dice, which are all very specific to manufacturing sector. We could easily adapt it. For example, SMAD was easily adapted in test environment, in software test environment. So some tenets could be easily be adopted in the IT and software environment. There were some which had to be tweaked to adapt to software environment, and there are certain tenets which were not possible to be adapted. So we took that approach and then came out with a lean methodology. That is when people started using lean. And I remember the first time when we coined the word lean, many people did not really understand what it meant in a IT or a software development environment. But nevertheless, we pursued with that, and then it did really help. So the point here is that lean becomes very handy and applicable when the organization is fairly large with a diverse set of people, and you have to infuse the continuous improvement initiative not as an intervention but as a culture. So from that perspective, it became very handy. And our success with lean vis-a-vis Six Sigma was much higher because of the way it could be assimilated into this. But if it is a smaller organization, this also goes to a point that was discussed, I think, by Kuldeep and John also. If it is a smaller organization, you do not have the provision to have an expert. But then the beauty of the lean is that one of the senior leaders or couple of the senior leaders can easily understand the lean concepts and then be the lean facilitator for the organization. You don't require a Six Sigma kind of a facilitator who needs to be well versed in data analytics and statistical analysis. Here it is more of a application that is required, understanding the concept, relating it to the value stream map that is there. Ultimately, both of them are focused on delivering value to the customer. So it is possible, even in a smaller organization where there is no provision for having a overhead like a lean facilitator, some of the senior people can easily understand, internalize the lean concept in relation to their organization and their operation, and then facilitate the team. And in startups, like kind of an environment, it is best that it is set at the beginning. That's what we did in my company. I run a company which is about 6 years old. The very beginning, we set that culture. When we were hardly 8 to 9 people, we set the culture. Today, we are about 70 people. So that culture, because it was set at the beginning, and very religiously practiced. It has been accepted. It is the first thing to be told to the people who are joining from outside or the fresher. They have no other way of thinking. They automatically come to the track of thinking in the lean way or the value creation way. So different organizations we can apply, but the bottom line is lean as a concept is equally applicable whether it is a large established organization. The way you implement is slightly different. It's good for even a small and medium sized organization. The way you introduce or practice it is slightly different. It is even applicable for a startup which is starting with 2 or 3 people today. There you apply it differently. So in all cases, you can still apply lean for the benefit of the organization. It's not only value delivery to the customer, it's a large value to the organization itself. Did it answer your question, Anshu?
Very well, Bala, and I think thank you so much for bringing in such a vast coverage from right from the large organization to a small and medium to a startup. And I think you're very well explained, and you've brought you have kind of set up your organization also pretty well as per the lean culture. So I think that brings out a very important focus. Uh, John, I have one question for you. Uh, in the current scenario, when we all know that lean is all about culture and things, how do you think we can implement that into the education segment, specifically when it comes to college students who are into variety of different things, and even in the school children category? Should we kind of try deploying those lean principles right from an early on, so that they can start deploying that into their household things slowly and their educational setup, and then eventually when they go to the organization they're actually well prepared?
Yes, that's a great point. I think probably the other speakers would join me too in welcoming more and more lean thinking at the lower levels, so that we're indoctrinating that sort of culture that we were talking about. Just having a basic problem solving culture, which lean and also Six Sigma help develop, critical thinking, basic process design elements, like how do you design a workplace so it's easy for the people doing the work, that kids could learn these some of these basic things. And then there's even more fundamental things that we teach in lean. There's two sides of two pillars of lean thinking that Toyota taught us. One of them was Kaizen. We tend to focus on for obviously for improvement for processes or the whole business. There's another pillar that didn't get a lot of attention, and it's called respect. And in the lean context, it's not just being nice to people, but it's actually respecting their minds, respecting their ability to develop, their ability to grow. And only when those two are in kind of a yin-yang balance, Kaizen and respect, do we see the real, true, sustainable high performance, because we're actually engaging people. But this notion of respect that I'm sure, for example, in schools, for example, in India, people get indoctrinated with some of those elements. They can see that it's also helpful for them as they grow up as professionals, and not just in society, but that notion of respecting people. And Toyota has actually expanded that notion to respect humanity, respect communities that we work in, and even respect the environment. So Toyota has 2050 very aggressive goals for completely zero emissions, zero carbon, everything. So what we're seeing is now more of a total holistic look at improvement, not only for business results, but for really kind of society as a whole. And what a wonderful thing that would be to teach to our children, wouldn't it?
Yeah, thanks. I think you're right, John. The Toyota has not just talked about lean in a in the processes point of view, it also has actually changed the environment. It also has given a different way of thinking to the people, and and respect the environment as well as the people into it, and then give deliver value to the customer. Uh, so I think that's a very important point. And John, I would also want to know, from Singapore or Southeast Asia companies' point of view, because you have got a lot of experience around that. What do you think is the adoption of lean methodologies, and is it like been there for some time, or they have started deploying that now? How's the kind of adoption in these countries at this point in time, or probably across the globe, if you have if you can throw some light on that?
Yeah, I think in Singapore, it's a pretty standard story. I think where we see here, like many other places, lots of great examples, um, but of course a lot of opportunities to spread further. And in a lot of cases around the world, since lean has been around for a while, like you mentioned in the chat box, the machine that changed the world, I think that came out around 1990. So it's been a while. It was so ahead of its time, though. It's still relevant now. But a lot of folks looked at it. They took out a few pieces, and then they started implementing things without, looking at, like we had mentioned, the cultural elements, for example. So they might think that they have done lean, but they may not have done it really the way it was supposed to have been done. Sector-wise, healthcare in Singapore has been using lean for a while. And we have stories around the world now with the coronavirus where using some lean thinking has been literally saving some lives by improving patient flow and patient outcomes. And I'm sure Six Sigma probably has some stories for that as well. Precision manufacturing has been there for a while. And there are the new areas like lean hotels, Marina Bay Sands, the big famous hotel that you might have seen with the big pool on top. They're actually using lean and Six Sigma right now. I'll be helping them with a few things later this year. And you mentioned schools. So the universities, there's one right near me, Singapore Management University, and other ones, they actually have a lean office. So they're helping internal processes in the university. Somewhat separately, there's also something called lean education, which there's not very many cases as we'd like around the world. So I think that's a great opportunity where you're actually rethinking, reimagining, and redesigning the process of education from end to end, and really probably tying it better with industry and what does industry need as far as skills, because usually you see a big gap, right, between what industry needs and what the schools are putting out. So the lean thinker would be thinking about how do you reinvent the whole education process, and along with that is something called lean learning. How do you apply lean thinking to the process of learning? So there's all kinds of exciting areas, and we see some of those areas are in Singapore and the region in Asia, and really all across the world. In our Lean Global Network, we have literally, we've got every continent other than Antarctica with lots of great examples, but yet still a lot of opportunities to do more.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think that's a very good example of what you mentioned of various things today, especially about the Lean University which you're talking about, and how they're managing their entire school in a very lean manner. And if we can bring up, in fact, I was talking to my daughter, and and I was actually telling her about the lean 7 or 9 types of waste. So Kuldeep, I have my own segment of 9 types of waste, including with mist. So whatever the people utilization you're talking about, we kind of make it as misutilization of resources or underutilization of resources. So it can be people or any other kind of infrastructure or any kind of resources for that matter. So that is where it becomes very, very important. And when I was talking to my daughter, it starts from a basic aspect which we always tell our children in terms of cleaning and keeping the things right, and numbering them, making them structured. This is nothing but lean. We call that as 5S very clearly, very easily. That's a standard methodology, 5S in lean. But actually it can be applied right from the early start. We can teach our children how to keep the house right. Our I think the housewives, the women, have been doing in their homes by marking those, their normal spices and all that with the right labeling and all that. That is nothing but lean. So I think the lean is a daily household aspect. It is just that we have given, Toyota has given that it is a basic good nomenclature and created as an entire end-to-end structure for a large organization as well. uh, I think that's something. It is going to be very, very important when it comes to the lean. And of course, when it comes to the Six Sigma, it might be little more technical, statistical, more mathematical, and require more of analysis and data. But lean is, as I think you and Kuldeep also have mentioned, it is the entire structure, right from the leadership level to the execution level. And it is not just having a methodology, it also involves the way you run your organization, the way your leadership works, way your thinking process works. So all of that brings consolidated into that. So that's something really great. And with this, I would want to request Mani, because Mani has designed this program called Design Your Unicorn, which is actually for Bringle, and he's working, in for that program as a strategic partner. Uh, have already got experience with dozens of startups to support. Muddy, what I would want to know from you is how this lean component you are bringing in this cross-border blended learning program, which is the Design Your Unicorn. So, what is that your thought when you kind of brought that lean culture into that?
Thanks, Anshav. Thanks for that. See, as we have been discussing most of the topics of lean, I definitely agree with all the speakers and all what they have shared so far of how lean and Six Sigma can be helpful. And let me just put this in inside of a startup. See, typically what happens in a startup scenario is like we have an idea and we just build some value around that idea, and we start rushing that idea into the market to acquire momentum for the value. But what we miss in the overall picture is we miss something called as business model that can actually tell whether the value can be attained from this idea and can it be scalable. So in process of doing that, there are various techniques like various methodologies that can be applied to build a business model. Like you can use design thinking. There are a lot of custom models, like for example, say farm to fork. A lot of models can be applied. But end of the day, arrive at a value, because again, going back to customers, keeping the customer in view and trying to deliver a value, the best way you could do it as for a startup, considering the points that we have here, like to start from the beginning, to keep it as a culture and all, the best thing a startup can do is like build a lean model of their idea and embed or imbibe that into part of the business model. So when they build over the business model and then try to experiment that business model in various options or various markets or various kinds of customers, it can give more standard results for them to understand how the idea can be taken to a next level. And once this can be drafted, documented, and looked at, that's when we can confidently say this, the challenges on scalability, the challenges on sustainability of the idea, all this can be achieved. And that's exactly we have designed in the form of unicorn, Design Your Unicorn, the program, where we have given 5 stages, and we take the startup through each and every stage, where in the first stage we tell them how to validate the idea. Second stage we tell them how to build the effective business model. and try to test in the market and try to understand the feedback. In the third stage, we apply this kind of lean techniques and metrics on the startup model or a business model, which can help them understand how to get the early revenues or get the customer feedback. And then they can extrapolate or multiply that kind of value that is generated at this level to the next level where they can apply a lot of metrics and try to scale it up. And once all these things go in the right way, then your startup can take to any level and your idea can fit any market and you can reach out to any border or cross border or anywhere. So that's exactly the way we have also structured the stages in design your unicorn. That's how we say as a white startup or a yellow startup, which is an ideation, green startup, which is making early revenues, or a blue startup, which is all the blue ocean strategy, what everyone wants. And finally, once everything is ready, then the startup can take the opportunities of the universe. That's where we say as a black or a universe, black stage startup or a universe startup. So definitely design your unicorn is kept in mind of all the techniques from the ideation side and also the concepts of lean. And definitely there is a chance to apply Six Sigma and all the other statistical variations and models to arrive at the desired value for the customer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mani, for that such a nice explanation. And I think I would just like to add there that while we were designing this program, Design Your Unicorn for startups, we were not considered, while the startup is going to be a kind of a buzzword in the industry today. But what it matters is that we are doing some business. When it comes to business, there is a customer. Whenever there is a customer, there has to be well-defined processes. Whenever there is a well-defined processes, there has to be a lean methodology. It has to be done the leaner, the best efficient manner. Once it is done, and once you have a large set of data coming in, you can actually start talking about reducing the variations, wherein probably the Six Sigma and other methodologies would start coming in. Uh, and it is the whole idea here is that right when you have probably not even having an idea right now, you just have a thought that you want to become an entrepreneur, you can actually have a model by which you can design your startup so that it will eventually become a unicorn. And that's the reason why we named it as Design Your Unicorn. Because and it does not mean that you can only design or aim for a unicorn only when you reach to a black belt or a black, you have achieved a good amount of revenues. What we are talking about is that even at the time when you don't even have a proper idea, you have a couple of ideas going on in your mind and you're just trying to validate that, just try to enable that in the into the environment, is what you can. At that point in itself, there are various tools and methodologies available which are basically can be utilized to ensure that you will eventually move into a unicorn stage. And I think that is where the four pillars of this entire strength starts from there. That is where we started with our first week of topic of thought leadership, which basically talks about the individuality, individual perspective, because you're starting as an individual and your leadership starts from there. You are a leader, you have to bring in a lot of followers for you. The second week goes about when you start talking about your customer, and when you understand about your customer, then you have to figure out that what you need to be doing, what is the customer requirement, how do you bring that to customer delight, what is the kind of methodology by which you can bring in, how you can understand both internal and external customers importance. And this week, which is now more on process, so process becomes takes it to the the second level, wherein a lot of lean methodologies would help you out to basically structure your organization much better, develop the quality DNA, set up the foundation. And once we move on to the next stage, which is the large, typically of a small or medium organization or even a large organization, where a lot of data will start coming in. And that is where you need to have enabled the right technology basis on the processes you have set up. You have to analyze the data, you have to protect the data. Because of the IT world, the cybersecurity issues will start cropping up. So this is how the entire program is what I think Mani has spoken about and categorized into the 5 stages. And it becomes very critical for people to take away their focus from only investments to back to the business, because ultimately now post COVID scenario, and there are a lot of reports going on. I mean, Sequoia Capital has recently published some webinars and reports wherein they are going to talk about more investments on the online platforms like Bringle, which is more of blended learning platforms, which are more of online platforms. They are more talking about platforms, or focusing more on unit economics rather than those cash burn scenarios. A lot of companies like Snapdeal, they have also followed up the same story, like success stories like Flipkarts and all, but then they changed their models because they were actually into the stage in 2015. So I got an opportunity to hear founders of Snapdeal in Taikon, Mumbai, where Deepak Parekh and Ratan Tata and Narayan Murthy were present. And what they were talking about is that how industry has kind of changed the focus from cash burn models to a unit economics model, which means that in each unit you produce, you are able to bring value out of it, and you put in only those charge it put in only those things which customer is ready to pay for, which is actually a very lean methodology, and that comes in financials, that comes in processes, that comes in many other aspects. So I think with this I would just want to request John to just answer one more question out here. uh, John, considering the current scenario, I think in the large organizations also we have been putting in a lot of resources. We were very, very people intensive into the organizations. Now, once this lean methodology started coming in, how people are, organizations focus are shifting from people to process.
Yeah, that's a really good question for today. I guess in lean thinking we look at it all together. Jim Womack, one of the authors that you mentioned in the chat there, James P. Womack, that wrote the first book that mentioned lean. So he used to always say, purpose, process, and people almost interchangeably. And then you could also add perhaps technology on that. So what we try to do is look at everything very seamlessly and put the customer first, put the process next, and then how does the technology and people fit into that? So in one sense, instead of looking at the org chart, we look at the process map first. So there would be a lot of opportunities to look at high-level processes as well as the smaller ones. And like some of the other speakers had said, really take a look at what is their value add. Anything that's not adding value, why are we doing it? If the customer's not willing to pay for it. And if people come out of the system, the lean approach is because we're always about adding value and not just cutting waste. And we had already mentioned the 8th types of waste, or he had mentioned 8 or 9, was that terrible waste of unutilized potential. So when we do have people that might come out of through a process improvement, the idea is that we don't put them on the street, but we reallocate them towards more valuable activities. We might even need to retrain them because there's always parts of the business that we wish we could work on if we just had more resources, right? And if we can free up those resources to work on those valuable things, then we can really look at innovation and looking past what's happening right now into new areas. And finally, I think another burgeoning area, so this is another part of lean that is, and someone had mentioned, I think, the ecosystem too. So looking past internal processes and really looking at the touch points externally too. And if we empower our people at the lower levels to do problem solving and continuous improvement, like we mentioned with lean culture, that frees up the managers to look at more systems level. So systems thinking and bringing in because we think that's really the wave of the future, is not to just focus internal, but what's the external touch points. And to do that, we have to look past our four walls. And thus, the leaders, the CEOs of the future are going to be spending more of their time outside than inside, we think.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think very well said. Uh, Kuldeep, I have one another question for you. Now how the difference is happening whenever there is a problem in an organization, or there is an error or a customer issue, or there is a complaint. We have a tendency, I have seen this tendency in organizations, that we always start finding out who is the culprit, who is the person who is responsible for it, and we actually start, we say, sack that person who has not done it well. How do you think that people are, is the people are responsible for those kind of errors, or is the process which is more important, which needs to be corrected?
Well, that reminds me of one of the interesting things which I used to tell my testing team. I was leading a software testing team for quite a long time.
Hmm.
And I was telling always that software testing or any testing is a non-value add activity which should not be done. But your
Right.
jobs will continue because developers will continue to make mistakes. And the irony of that was that if there used to be any defect reported in production or beyond the phase of testing which my team was supposed to do testing, the first question used to be asked that who tested it.
Right.
Question never came who developed it, or who designed it,
Absolutely.
or who gave in the requirements. And
Right.
I used to always say that, well, the testing team has done whatever was given to them as a product. Now, if your requirements process has not been done properly, if your design activity has been circumvented, developer wanted to push the product through, and the tester, somebody was sitting on his head saying that, well, it needs to be sent tomorrow, so do whatever and give me a report. This is what you get. Now, that brings to the focus what you asked in terms of that in a people centric organization. When I say people centric, it's people dependent, not that people focused or employee engagement
Right.
kind of organization, but people dependent organization, wherein the success or failure of the product, process, service, or the organization is dependent on those star performers, which typically are crisis managers. Well, they will come out of all crisis unscathed, and they will resolve everything. The life of those organizations is too short because the backbone of processes is not existing. Those guys go away, something happens, some emergency, the organizations or the products go down in a jiffy. And hence the focus on processes. Even if we look at uh, the current situation of COVID-19, what is there? And it is interesting to relate in terms of how a problem solving approach, whether consciously or subconsciously, is being applied. And people are defining maybe processes on the go. Like yesterday evening or today morning, there was this article which was there wherein classifying into the zones, that is red, yellow, and green, and accordingly lockdowns to be staggeredly lifted. That process never existed because lockdowns never were thought of in most of the countries in the world. But then processes are getting developed. It's not an individual who is deciding. And that's to the other point wherein you were talking about education and how do we bring in into the education industry. One is application of lean, and the other is that henceforth going forward, or even today, majority of the things are, the leadership is not at a central, it's distributed leadership across. And that is wherein decision making authorities empowerments are cutting across, because the executive will give the support, the execution will be happen by the experts, and somebody would be taking those services as a consumer or a customer. And hence the value chain, whether it is internal, external, and linkages which are there, well defined processes will help to establish those linkages in advance, will help to identify the potential failures in advance, and accordingly the risks associated with that proactively, in terms of that if there is going to be some failure at a particular point or a potential likelihood of a failure, accordingly mitigation plans or contingency plans would be defined. So it is going to be a holistic approach in terms of when we talk, it's not a manufacturing or a service process, but it's the entire process of how am I strategizing, how am I putting it in operations, how am I selling it, how am I distributing it, how am I accounting it. It's that whole thing, like somebody was talking about business modeling, and those become the vital components of any business model or any business organization. And hence having that process backbone, uh, many people think that process means a documented process. Well, that's a nice to have in my mind. But then, even if it is not documented but understood, documentation helps to ensure compliance and also helps to ensure adherence, may or may not guarantee quality. But adoption and implementation of even an undocumented process consistently across the organization definitely would guarantee quality and consistency. So the myth that a process needs to be documented, well, it's a myth. Fact is that processes do get implemented. Many people would like to document it later, but documentation helps in bringing new people on board, especially with the large organization, and that's wherein the differences between small organizations and large organizations as well come in. I'm not denying the fact that documenting processes is important, but then it's not necessary that all processes need to be documented. There could be various levels in the aspect. But yes, processes do form a valuable and an important backbone on the success of the organization.
I think Kuldeep, you have brought up a point of standardization with the process documentation, and that is the standardization is required because then when multiple people keep coming in, no, none of us, I mean, will have time to train and tell everybody that you are doing this mistake, you have to follow this process and stuff. So documentation is definitely required. May not be for a small organization immediately, but eventually it will be required. Even if it is a one or two people, it is better to document a process and then train the people as per those processes. So another two aspect which you brought it up, and probably from the, I'm just trying to terming it with respect to the lean methodology, is one is first time right.
Yes,
Because when we talked about software testing, and I always say that quality is actually a non-value added activity. Quality check, I mean,
yes,
because it means that if you have to do a quality check, you have not done something right. You have already wasted that. There is a waste which is already created in the entire environment of the organization. What you are trying to do is you are trying to put up another effort to ensure that the quality does not get passed, or that bad quality does not get passed to the customer. But customer is
definitely.
not paying for the same. I mean, they are not bothered how many times you have kind of struggled to get this right product in place. What they're seeing is the product for which they're ready to pay the price.
Absolutely.
And unless we are able to define that, like for a simple example, that it is always good to have best of the, like Kingfisher for that matter, the airlines, they started giving all those best of those earphones and everything. But who is looking for that? I mean, maybe 50% of the people, or even 20-30% of the people used to use it, and rest of them only used to carry that along with them. And it was such a wasteful activity and extra cost which they have put in, and which kind of killed that organization. I mean, of course, that is one example. There are many more examples into that entire model, but that is only one point. The another point which you have brought up is the visual control.
Yes,
Because see what happens when individual is running that process or working on that process, unless that process is available in front of them, how the results are coming in, that also has to be taken care with respect to very visually available to them. And John, from an IT organization or from any other organization, how do you see visual control is important, and what are the different kind of visual controls which we can brought in into an organization?
This one's for me.
Yeah, yes, John.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. You see around in our little WhatsApp groups in the Lean community, we share a lot of the visual controls that are happening now with the coronavirus. For example, here in Singapore, there was a rule for a while in our food courts, in our public food areas, like where people would be sitting next to each other pretty close. No one was allowed to sit next to another person. So what they did was, a very lean concept was they started taping with an X, a red X on the seats that you're not allowed to sit in. So you walk in the place, you know, in 1 second, you know, I can sit here, I cannot sit here. And it's just such a beautifully simple example of lean thinking, visual control out there that anybody can use. So at a worker level, what are the visual controls that make the work easier? And then at a management level, what are the visual controls that we need for critical information? Because now a lot of data and information and it's all locked into a computer somewhere. Computers are great for analysis. They're not so great for getting a team around looking at for potential problems or opportunities and really doing some problem solving as a team. So we love to get critical information out of the computers and put them, even if it's on a whiteboard. What's the most important thing for that particular team? It could be a low-level team at the ground level, like we mentioned the hotel. You know, they were using a whiteboard in housekeeping to monitor their critical, like for example, how many people coming in, what's their turnover time for a room cleaning, whatever is important for them at their level. Then as you go up to even the leadership level, they're using visual controls for what's important at their level. So micro and macro, we think the visual controls really help design the work, maintain the work, and manage the work.
Yeah, I think John, very good example, specifically in the current times, and how a lean thinking or even a visual control, a simple aspect can be utilized. And I've also seen in India, we see that on outside every shop, they have made those circles or a square boxes where you have to stand, and there is a social distancing, kind of a 1 meter or kind of small distance which they have kept in. And if you are not following in that, the shopkeeper himself is saying that you cannot get the things, please stand in queue and you have to stand in those boxes only. And I think that's another, it's a very wonderful example of that cross mark which you have mentioned. And physically it is definitely is happening. And I think in technology world it is much more easier with our lot of early warning systems and things like that, which is, I think we will go on and on in this topic. uh, with this, I would want to ask Sharmila if she can kind of talk about little bit of lean principles and the usage specifically from the disability point of view, and bring her thoughts that how it is useful for the people who are disabled, and how it can be implemented in various different organizations to utilize the lean thinking.
Uh, Good evening, people. Uh, I am very sure that we can implement a lot of things, but would it be cost effective? And that is one thing that we have to see. One aspect is the entire organization or the entire lean organization being implemented for a office in as far as accessibility is concerned. It's a huge cost. Yes, today if we are looking at something digital, then probably the cost is at an individual level where we can add or subtract things on our systems ourselves. But beyond that, Ansha, it's going to be cost heavy. It's really cost heavy.
Okay. And is it
I have made certain changes in my earlier organizations. I at a certain level, but not beyond that. So when it comes to cost, yes, people will falter.
okay? But see, I think from a small, there could be very small cost which can be incurred and made it more leaner. I mean, it can be still a leaner and take care of the disability aspects or the people who are disabled. Like one of the example which I recently saw in a restaurant. The restaurant was at the first floor, and what they have done is they have put up basically alongside the staircase. They have put up that electric chair which they can.
Mechanized chair. Yeah,
Right. And it's a very simple gesture, but not very
yeah.
costly as well. But it helps them to increase their business because it will give them, the elderly people can go, the disabled people can go, and the children can use it. So a lot of applications which it happens. Now, it may not cost a bit. It is still a lean thinking. And the beautifully they have done is they've now increased the set of customers for them.
See, I have thought of a mechanized chair myself because I have old parents at home. You have seen my house. It is a two-story place. But the thing is, if I install it, so yes, business house can do that, but at an individual level, it doesn't work. I have that with me. Those figures are there.
Got it. I think your point is valid, Sharmila. So I was only trying to understand that how critical is going to be having that, in the organization, the disability angle and how the lean practices can be built in over there. But I think I got a fair idea on this. And Sharmila, I know that you work a lot of, you do a lot of work in terms of disability audits for the organization, small and big, including educational institutions and supporting them on various technology aspects as well when it comes to the platforms and specifically when you develop Bringle platform to make it more inclusive. So I think very interestingly, which things are being brought up. You want to share something, Shamila?
Yes, I do. I have been researching a lot of other platforms also, as you know. Most of them don't have what we have. At Zoom, uh, uh, they have an option to switch on or switch off uh, closed captioning. That is, the way we are speaking, we can have the subtitling uh, at at the lower channel where we see the mute and the stop. We can have subtitling individually. Names come up, and we have that kind of facility in Zoom, whereas other platforms don't have it. I have been researching that. I have also taken up research on YouTube. So YouTube also has uh, the subtitling or closed captioning with them. So the way it works here, it doesn't work elsewhere. So I am very proud of the fact that we have a platform that is available to deaf people, integrated with voice and subtitles, video and subtitles.
I think Sharmila, you brought up a good point out here that when it comes to technology, there are features available. The problem happens in terms of usage and applications of it. We don't even know most of the times, and that is where probably at Bringle platform we can kind of use all these features, and with your expertise we kind of bring in and integrate that and make it more user friendly, so that more and more people can take the benefits of that, because not everybody can kind of research out and bring those aspects from that. They might be using a Zoom facility only to have a video conference, but there are much more beyond that. There are many more
Yes.
issues which can start coming in, and from that perspective. So I think it's a collective approach and the thought process which is there, which is working out as a better platform with Bringer. So thanks for that, Sharmila. I think we have two questions, one from Devaspati Bhatt and one from Lavanya. uh,
Yes, I'll.
okay, so it is Sharmila, this question is, I'm just unmuting
Okay.
all of
Fine.
allowing everybody to unmute themselves. Lavanya, can you please unmute yourself and ask
Yeah,
the question?
I actually didn't have a question as much as I wanted to be able to bring, this aspect into, focus that now when we were looking at, lean thinking, and as Sharmila was posing this aspect about the economics of, of the processes. So we, of course, when we're looking at something which is unorthodox or which is not normal or which is not already acceptable in the system, it is going to mean a little financial investment to be able to bring it into a system, in my opinion. I don't know, Sharmila, if you agree or not, but we, for one, we have a building construction company, and where we are encouraging young engineers into understanding and getting trained into using sustainable alternative practices of construction. So this is not something that is done, and neither are they educated in this system, or nor are they familiar with it. So mistakes are going to occur, and it is already taken for granted that their errors or their mistakes is what is going to cost the company, and hopefully we're going to be able to intervene at the right time to be, shorten the process.
Yes.
So yeah, Lavanya, what you mentioned, actually, I think there is a question from Devaspati on the same grounds, and he is asking, where will mistake proofing, which is called as Pokayoke in Lean, will get fit, and how important it is. John, would you want to answer that?
Thank you. There was one very interesting story I saw again with the coronavirus. So there was a gentleman in Europe, it was either Italy or Spain. So he heard that there's this 1 meter distance rule, right? And he physically made a cardboard circle, 1 meter radius, cut it out, and put it on top of him so that the circle was around his whole body. And he walked into the store, and people were looking at him like he's crazy. And they're asking him, what are you doing? He says, they say we have to stay 1 meter away. This is how I'm making sure we're 1 meter away. So people physically couldn't actually come 1 meter towards him because they would hit the cardboard that he put around himself. So again, another really wonderful little example of a Pokeyoki device. And I was at a conference in Bulgaria last year. There was a young programmer. He was literally, I think, 22 years old. and his whole speech was on how do you do poka-yoke in the digital space, going back to what I mentioned, lean digital, because he was saying there's so many errors in coding that people usually don't worry about because, well, you just get another coder and you just spend more time on it. So what he was doing was very almost scientifically going through the process of coding. How do you make sure that coding is done right the first time, every time? Because like you mentioned, inspection, even programming inspection is a waste. So anybody that's interested in having better quality, reducing waste, doing things better for the customer, poka-yoke is the way to go.
Absolutely, John. And I think Kuldeep, you want to add something on this with some specific examples?
Um, well, examples in the sense it's more about what we call it as foolproofing or mistake proofing. It's typically also known as foolproofing, FOOL. So any fool should not be able to make a mistake or get into it.
Very
Um,
nice.
one it's quite some time back. I remember as an example, like before those car lockings came in with the remote. People used to have a problem of leaving the keys inside the car and lock the car. The front doors where the driver and the co-driver, it used to be they can open the door, the keys could remain inside, but by pressing the lock, and it used to get locked and the keys were inside, and it happened quite a few times. And at that point of time, when I was buying a car as well, replacing my existing car, and I went into one of the manufacturer showroom, and he pointed out as their how they are preventing that failure, that if the doors are open, it can't be locked from outside, from inside. So so that you don't forget the keys inside and you have to call somebody to open your car, and which actually can also result into carjacking or your car being stolen or so well. So mistake proofing or poka-yoke or fool proofing is an important aspect of prevention. It's more about defect prevention activity, and the more we do that, and I come back to again the definition of processes. Once we define the processes, we identify potential failures, and how do we ensure prevention of those failures or defects. And that is the importance, again, the value stream mapping or the process definitions come into picture. And that is how you can do the mistake proofing. So and if an person who is not aware of your product and what ways the products can get failed, if those are taken care of naturally, like even if you look at your washing machines today, especially the automatic washing machines, you can't open the doors when they are in operation, and that's mistake proofing or fool proofing in terms of, so that you don't enter and have an accident by just accidentally even opening the washing machine door. Whereas the semi-automatic machine, you could do everything. You could open the lid, you could put more clothes, remove existing clothes, whatever wanted was possible on that. So technology is definitely helping in doing that. Plus, uh, design as well as process definitions will also help in doing foolproof.
Very right, very right. I think you've given a very, very good example of a local household from a washing machine perspective. I also would like to, actually share a very simple thing which everybody would immediately understand of a example of a poka. So everybody uses computer, right? At least for opening up a Word document or opening up a computer or shutting down or putting it something like that. There is a message comes onto your screen whenever you try to close something. So it says, would you want to shut it down? Yes or no? Would you want to close it down? Yes or no? That is actually the best example of poka-yoke. It is actually giving you a warning sign saying that you still check whether you want to really perform that action or not. So it is giving you an opportunity to do that. So there are three levels of poka-yoke which happens into an organization in any processes. The one aspect which happens is it just gives you a message that yes, there is something which can go wrong if you do something like this, but the system will allow you to pass through. It will not hamper your actions. The second step which happens in a poker UK, wherein it gives you a warning, it stops your action to perform further, which I explained it with the example of yes and no. The third aspect which happens, wherein it will not even allow you to move forward whatever you do. Typically in large manufacturing organization where there is chances of explosions and all if you do something wrong. So there are set controls which they put up at the back end. So whatever you do, it will not allow you to do that. One very good example is that you cannot plug your, can you, you know, we cannot plug a US socket into an Indian socket.
Yeah.
That is an example of a poker yoke. You cannot do that. The floppy disk, the USB connection, all of those are that unless you have a best fitment of that, you cannot insert anything into it. You may damage it, but it will not get into this. That's the final aspect of this which works out. And I think we have actually extended our session today, and I just couldn't stop myself from such a intense discussion at this, for today of this. And actually, it's one of my core subjects, so it's very touchy to me to talk about it. But thank you, John. Thanks, Kuldeep, for your precious time in spending this long 1.5 hours with us. In fact, it's almost like 95 minutes. And then, sharing wonderful insights on lean methodology, waste elimination, various aspects of it. I would also want to thank Radio Masti 24 by 7 Singapore, who are airing daily, our pearls of wisdom of various speakers who are coming on our daily show every day on their channel. The Radio Masti 24 by 7, you can download or you can listen to that there by downloading their mobile application, both on Android and iOS. They are the only Hindi speaking radio channel in Southeast Asia. So while there will be all of those airing will be in English. So because it will be a global audience, and so do watch that over there as well. Do not miss out on that. I also would like to thank specifically Rajshri, who has been kind of supporting us for speaking to all the speakers and coordinating, sending them messages, connecting them, and what good work which she's doing with Purnam Foundation on gender neutrality. I would like to thank Charu for also, making this entire show, taking it to the entire globe, connecting the various experts, and she herself being a very, good influencer and a founder of womenlines.com magazine, an online magazine, which is doing wonders all across the globe. Uh, I would want to thank Mani for designing this specific program, DYU, Design Your Unicorn, and being part of this initiative of 21 Days Business Sustainability Challenge. And of course, Mani, your efforts with the startups is really, really commendable. And we would want to help many more businesses and startups all across the globe. Uh, I also would like to thank Sharmila, who has been there with me in thick and thin times for last 3 years now. Is working as a co-founder of Bringle and CEO of Bringle. She's also managing the CSR wing of Bringle, which is Vardhan, and she's the managing director for the same. She takes care of a lot of aspects on disability around that. I also would like to thank Simran, who has always been supporting us from the back end, managing the platform, supporting us, coordinating and things onto that. And Divya, who has been very supportively in passing on the messages, spreading the Bringle Dream Wave, and Shuchi. Shuchi is I think had to leave today, but she's always been there on the social media, supporting this initiative, forwarding this initiative, talking about it. So Divya and Shuchi, thanks to you specifically for making this initiative going across the globe and attaching more and more people. So that's something which, it's a very core team which we are working, and we are getting good support. Uh, I would want to request Rajshri to kind of talk about the pulse of wisdom and Mani, if you have captured from today's discussion.
Okay. Again, today there were so many abbreviations, so many definitions. It was almost like I had a crash course on process Six Sigma and Lean. I think that's a one thing wonderful thing happened. Thanks, Ansha. What is John spoke about what is lean, technology. It is a focus on customer value and how to increase the customer value. That is, and waste elimination. This is what he spoke about. And he also highly talked about how lean focuses more on management system, strategy, process, leadership, people. So it cuts across the entire business level that we have. And he gave about the Toyota example, the Toyota book, which originally it was written for the manufacturing, the core, the segment what they had and how it changed to Toyota way to service excellence. I've seen this, all of you spoke a lot about Japanese, and I worked with Japanese company for 2 years. And I, being a HR head there, it's not only at the operations level, even in the HR, we were supposed to follow everything. And that is where I learned that it's the process that, everybody's talking about. It's not, the operations customer. It goes everywhere. And working with and our bosses were Japanese. So it was a different experience. So I can understand how in depth it goes. Then coming to the coming to Kuldeep sir, you talked about there were a lot of anecdotes you gave, and you talked about transportation, innovation, machine waste. There was a I could not. I'm going to talk to you and take all the anecdotes that you have given because those are important. I was not able to capture everything. Still, I have captured so that we will be able to circulate for our audience later. It was Tim Wood that you spoke about. You highly talked about how now the waste of talent is becoming more focus is more on that, and which from a HR point of view I can say that yes, that is something very very important. And if it can be put to use, lot of creativity can flow, which will lead to innovation and productivity, because your process is somewhere at the it starts with the creativity, and it comes from the human talent and human potential. uh, you also talked about how customers what they want is something everything early and on time in full error free. That's what you mentioned, and this is so apt today that there is no time. You have to give everything on time. You in other discussions that we had, you talk about how the lean model is not the technology. It's a habit, it's a system, it's a culture, it is an integral part of the organization. So focus should be not project wise, but it has to be a part of the organization. It has to be a culture of the organization, and it is a continuous improvement that should happen. You referred about COVID example, problem solving approach, and how the process is discussed as a document, and only process is effective when it is implemented or it is put in use. So even if it is not documented, but it is implemented. So the myth that you talked about was wonderful. And when I was working with Otis Elevator, I had changed their 40-year-old policy document. And I remember without documentation, they were doing fantastic things. So this is where I could relate that when I changed everything, I changed to undocumented processes which were in place. So that is a wonderful point you came up. And I like the foolproofing and mistake proofing. That is a FOOL foolproofing. So that is why I said, sir, I'm going to sit with you and collect all the abbreviation that you spoke. Balas spoke about Lean is a culture and Six Sigma is an intervention. His Wipro experience and how the map the manufacturing model was transitioned over to the service industry, especially IT, which was that time was a new age industry. Money, fantastic, your unicorn. I think every time I hear and every time I listen from you and Anshav, I feel that, oh wow, this is such a wonderful project. There is a lot of value that you have added to that. And one value you talked about is that when you do all these process related any interventions, you forget the business model, and that is so important. So you said that all along your process journey, the business model has to be kept in mind, and which creates which is the differentiator what you talk about in your unicorn, the strategy that you have built. Anshav, I think I should not talk about you because you have got so much of knowledge. I'm not able to absorb so much. I need some more time. But
Basically, you are telling me whatever I have said is of no value.
No, I think in
I'm
my
just
next
kidding.
session,
I'm just kidding, Rajshri.
in next section, I'm going to start teaching whatever you have said. But you simplified a lot of methods. You simplified by giving examples from the day-to-day life. I think it made it easy. And what John also talked about visual control and how visual control works. I didn't know this is called visual control. It's a wonderful thing that we do it everywhere.
Absolutely.
And we see it, but see how beautifully it is defined. And Sharmila, thanks for bringing out the disability aspect. I think India is yet to go long way in terms of giving due respect to this area. We have to give. We talk a lot about disability. We talk about everything, but I think India has to do a lot, and that time will come. You always say that government takes time. I think with this lot of changes that are coming, this aspect will also be changed. Thank
Yes,
you.
Rajeshri, it is time that we address this, and
Yes,
the government is indeed serious on this.
very good.
I know that for sure.
Fantastic, fantastic.
But the thing is, 20 years back, when I was in Canada, I had a wheelchair in the bus. One of my peers was in a wheelchair, and he got onto the bus
Wow.
in the wheelchair.
Okay.
Today also we don't have low floor buses where I can push the wheelchair, or the wheelchair user can go into the bus himself or herself.
Yes,
So
that's
very small things, but they don't happen. I just talked of the mechanized chair. It's 3 lakhs per share. A business can buy it, but
yeah.
a household can't.
Agree. There is a
If it is 30,000, I think the entire scene would change today.
thanks. I can very well understand what you're from where you're coming. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody. Money you can add if you want. Otherwise, I'm done with my today's pearls of wisdom. Thanks.
I really like the word crash course, Rashri, because this has been really a crash course. And I'm
Yes.
so grateful to all speakers for such an
Every
enlightening.
speaker was so fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you
Yes,
so
yes.
much to everybody. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. Yes, Money.
No, I haven't captured anything. I was actually immersed in listening to all the speakers.
Wow.
It was very well done. Yeah.
Buddy is trying to be modest now. Anyways.
Money is trying to be nice with me.
Yeah, let's put it that way. That's better.
Okay.
So-
Thanks, Money.
But anyways, I think thanks everybody. And Rachli, you have very well said, and Charu, you have acknowledged it's a crash course. The purpose of this 21 days business sustainability challenge is to give people a entire perspective of 4 pillars and
Correct.
21 days and probably the 100 steps by which they can definitely sustain their businesses. And there are various components of it. It is not necessary that every business if you're struggling today, if you're not having a business continuity planning, if you don't have a plan B, plan C, plan D, you don't know your customer, you don't have the right experiences being set up. These are all various aspects. Now, how do you structure that into a step-by-step approach is what Design Your Unicorn project does. That is what that program doesn't. So while this crash course will definitely help people to help themselves whatever they can, and ultimately achieve their reach to that sustainability space. But yes, there would be a detailed program which is already available with Bringle. You can definitely go to in the community of Designer Unicorn and actually submit on that. I would also want to request and invite few businesses who have utilized this crash course to make some changes in their businesses. If you can come up with those inspiring stories, we would be want to bring you on board and share your story to the entire world. So apart from that, there is another live pitching week which is happening starting from 27th of April. So please log on to Bringle Academy community page, bringleacademy.com/course/business sustainability, and upload your pitch deck for the live pitching week to our cross-border investors. With this, I would like to thank everybody, whoever is present here along with my team. Thank you so much, and keep bringing, keep growing.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you all.
everyone.
Have, have,
Thanks.
have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.